All right. What is going on, everybody? Truth and Tell Us Ministries. Gonna do a quick one today, but it's going to be powerful and important, I believe. Talking about Second Maccabees can absolutely prove this is not inspired scripture. The Catholics would say it is part of their canon. Let's talk about why it's important. First and foremost, they use Second Maccabees as a proof text for the I guess the idea of purgatory for one. Number two, for intercession of the saints. So yeah, definitely not something that's biblical. We need to take a look at this and show how it is not. So here's what the claim is. Okay, one of the main claims, at least, one of the main claims would be that in Hebrews chapter 11, okay, there is verse 35. There is a word used here for struck down, which is typhanizo. Typhanizo. Okay. So here's what the claim is, and I'll show you the word here in I'll pull it up on my screen so you can see. Let me share my other screen. Yeah, I mean, it's strange for sure, but let's take a look here. And it's this word, okay? The word for being struck down, and it is G7. Oh, wait, no, sorry, G5178. Okay, so according to the going theory, this word is only used once in Hebrews 11:35, and a similar word, or at least a derivative of this word, is found in Second Maccabees when it's talking about the death of the man here. Which is ooh. The man that was the high priest at the time, which would be let's see. We're going to take a look at this here, guys. Hold on. Here we go. Eleazar. So let me share my screen real quick. I'm going to share this one so we can get total context. Okay, so there's this he was a Jewish martyr that died during this time of Second Maccabees, right? And how he died is that he was put onto a torture instrument, and this torture instrument is known as the typinum. Okay, so this is describing supposedly a type of torture that people went through from the Grecian armies or the Grecian Empire, where somebody would be put on like a drum-like structure, a drum-like rack, and they'd be beaten. Okay. So here's the claim: because this word is used to describe the death of Eleazar, when Paul is referencing it in Hebrews 11:35, saying others were typanizod, it's that he's referencing to Second Maccabees, so it has to be inspired. The issue is that while the root word is very similar, it's the same idea necessarily. This Eleazar is not who's being talked about, because Eleazar is is the only one that's talked about, I guess, being beaten like a drum. So you can see here it talks about this other stuff, the woman and her sons, right? In Maccabees 7, chapter 7. So they'd say, well, see, look, this is also what's being talked about here in Hebrews 11:35, because it says women took out of the resurrection their died sons, but others were typanizod, not being readily receptive to the loosening or to the redemption, so that they may attain a better resurrection. The problem is that when we look at how, I guess, this woman and her 7 sons died, it doesn't necessarily say that they were killed in the same way that this Eleazar was killed. Okay, so that's like the first thing we have to look at. When you look here, Second Maccabees, chapter 7. Look at this. So one has his hands and feet cut off, then the rest of his body is thrown to be burned to death. Second, third, fourth, and sixth are similarly tortured. They're scalped and their limbs are cut off before being thrown into a cauldron. And then the mother encourages her sons to continue to defy them. Suddenly, the mom and the younger son die. Then you've got Eleazar, okay, being beaten or tortured. Look at the wording of Hebrews 11:35, though. I'm going to go back to that. And again, this is not something that, needs to be, I mean, it's important to talk about, but it's dead on arrival as far as I'm concerned. Women took their dead sons out of took out of resurrection their dead sons, but others were struck down. Well, who's the others? The others, the nearest antecedent is the dead sons. So the dead sons being tiphanizod. Nowhere in chapter 7 did we ever read that any of these sons were tiphanizod. Okay. And it's plural. The word here for others is plural. Aloi. So that would mean that it would have to be talking about multiple people that were tiphanizod. Only Eleazar is talked about as being tiphanizod. The problem is as well that the word just means beaten like a drum. That's what this word means. It does not necessarily imply that they're putting on a tipanizo, the type of or tipanzio or whatever, the type of torture instrument talked about there. And also, there's no actual evidence of that really being a torture device at the time of Grecian conquest, because those things were made out of wood and none of them survived. You can do your research on that. They have an idea of what it may have looked like as a giant drum-like wheel that somebody would be put on and then beaten. But to be quite frank and quite honest with you, this holds no water. Okay. That's the first thing I wanted to discuss. The second thing that's important to discuss, and this is the actual nail in the coffin for people that say, oh, well, when we're looking at Maccabees, it's got to be inspired, is the nature of how it describes Antiochus Epiphanes' death. Okay. So it's important that I guess we kind of look at this here. I'm gonna just pull up chapter 9, okay? And we're gonna look at it together and we'll see why this is not accurate. And then we can say, see, look, Second Maccabees is not inspired. So here is Second Maccabees chapter 9, and it says here about that time. Okay, so here's the problem. If we look at chapter 8, it says here that at about the time of the one who had promised to provide tribute for the Romans by the capture of the people of Jerusalem, proclaimed that the Jews had a champion and that because they followed the laws laid down by him, they were unharmed. Okay. Time of Nicanor, things like that. Well, the phrase about that time, what Catholics do is they try to say, well, see, this is telescoping because the time of chapter 8 is about 3 years before history affirms that Antiochus Epiphanes died. And the nature of his death is not what Second Maccabees talks about at all. But let's just look at when it's talking about that time. The Greek word there, the Greek phrase used there, is never used anywhere else, not inside the Septuagint and not inside the New Testament, to ever telescope time forward by 3 years or even a year. About that time is a Hebraic phrase meaning literally in the proximity of the time of the thing that was being described. So, about that time, Antiochus retreated in disgrace from the region of Persia. So, Second Maccabees is saying, well, 3 years before Antiochus Epiphanes' death, he comes back from Persia and he entered into a city called Persepolis. He attempted to rob the temples and gain control of the city. The people had swift recourse to arms, and Antiochus's forces were routed, so that in the end, Antiochus was put to flight by the people of that region and forced to beat a shameful retreat. So he goes into this other place. He learns what happened to Nicanor and to Timothy's forces. So this is talking about, again, in the same time frame of what was happening in chapter 8. Okay, so these people, Timothy and Nicanor, they were killed, right? The Jews had their uprising. So he is somehow in chapter 9 leaving Persia, gets told that it happened, right? Then he gets all mad and he goes, he says, I will make Jerusalem the common graveyard of Jews as soon as I arrive there. So God of Israel struck him down with an incurable, invisible blow. He had uttered those words when he was seized with excruciating pains in his bowels and sharp internal torment. Okay, a fit punishment. And so he goes, but look at this. Far from giving up his insolence, he was all the more filled with arrogance. Breathing fire in his rage against the Jews, he gave orders to drive even faster. As a result, he hurtled from the speeding chariot, and every part of his body was racked by the violent fall. And then he was in superhuman presumption, blah, blah, blah. And he's carried on a litter, clearly manifesting to all the power of God. It was swarmed with worms, and while he was still alive in hideous torments, his flesh rotted off, so that the entire army was sickened by the stench of his corruption. Okay, and basically it says he dies. Let's look at here. Okay, look at this. So now that I am ill, I recall with affection your esteem and goodwill. On returning from the regions of Persia, I fell victim to a troublesome illness, so I thought it necessary to form plans for the general security of all. And then he died a miserable death in the mountains of a foreign land. His brother, Philip, brought the body home, but fearing Antiochus' son, he later withdrew into Egypt to Ptolemy Philometor. what is being talked about here in chapter 9 is that he came into the region of Judea and died there 3 years before his death. That's not what history would affirm in multiple sources. Okay, so let's look at this here. And there's again multiple sources that say this is how Antiochus Epiphanes died. But when we look here at his actual recorded death, Britannica says that he went onto the Arabian coast and died in Persis or Persia. One of many sources. Okay. So we have a contradiction here. Antiochus Epiphanes did not rush back into Judea and die there. Okay. And plus, it's saying 3 years before his actual death. So this is the problem that I've never seen how a Catholic comes about. The only thing they could say is, well, no, you see, what happened is really the Bible has the supreme ultimate authority and precedence, and the other historians got it wrong. Look, I don't take that approach necessarily. I think the Bible should be congruent with history. That's how we prove the Bible. This proves that Second Maccabees is not inspired. First Maccabees as well is entirely pro-Hasmonean. There are reasons why, ladies and gentlemen, these books were rejected, okay? Rejected as canon. They didn't just sit down and say, we just don't like the Catholics, so we're just going to make some stuff up. I mean, it's legitimately because these books do not hold water. Now, the other thing, too, that I want to point out is that if we're talking about purgatory, because the claim is that in Second Maccabees, it talks about this guy found these Jews were dead on a battlefield. He found these foreign pagan necklaces on them, and he goes and he makes a blood atonement for them after they die to make sure they go to heaven. Okay. The problem is that idea of purgatory flies right in the face of Romans 2:6, Revelation 20:13, 2 Corinthians 5:10, Hebrews 9:27, and Daniel 12 in the nature of the resurrection and the judgment. What do I mean by that? Well, let me show you. We're going to share the Bible, run through this real quick again, and you guys will see. So let's look at Romans 2:6. In context, okay, it says that God gives to each one according to his works. And this is talking about the day of wrath and unveiling and the righteous judgment of God. Now, this is talking about AD 70, but a Catholic would be like, nope, this is talking about the final judgment and resurrection, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But look what it says here, that he is giving to each one according to his works. That has gotten, where is purgatory in there? Where does it say, except for the ones that had stuff done for them in, after they were dead, post-mortem? No, doesn't say that anywhere. And we look at Revelation 20:13. It says, and the sea gave up the dead who are in it, and death and Hades give up the dead which are in them, and they will be condemned, every one of them according to their works. Okay, where is it? Where is purgatory in there? Where does it say according to their works, except for the ones that had some stuff done for them post-mortem? It's not in the Bible. 2 Corinthians 5:10. For to all it is binding to be revealed to us in front of the podium of the Christ, so that each one may fetch the things having become through the body to which he practiced, whether good or malicious. Now this is ultimate judgment when we die. This is not talking about 80, 70 or anything like that. Everybody goes in front of the podium of the Christ, and so they fetch the things having become through the body to which he practiced, whether good or bad or malicious. Where is it saying there, except for those that had some stuff done for them post mortem? It's not there. Hebrews 9:27 as well. I mean, this is just terrible. Inasmuch as it is laid away for the human to deaden away once, but after this, the judgment. Where does it say that anybody can have anything done for them post-mortem right here? They die and then the judgment. There's no sanctification process after they die. There's no holding place. There's no, shibbity shoobity bobbity. And again, Daniel chapter 12, the nature of the resurrection is that many out of those sleeping in the Adama of the dust will wake up. These to the living ones of the eon, and these to revelaments for deterrence of the eon. This is the nature of the resurrection, ladies and gentlemen. There's nothing about, oh, well, you did the right thing, you did this and you did that after you died. No, there's no, oh, somebody went and they made a sacrifice for you after you died, or you had your indulgences paid for. This is not biblical. Okay? There is no purgatory. As a matter of fact, the Bible specifically, explicitly, implicitly, if you don't think the resurrection has already happened, in Ecclesiastes 9:5, completely debunks it. For the living ones know that they will die, but the dead ones, they do not know anything, and there is no reward to them anymore, for their remembrance is forgotten. Show to me where in here it says the dead know things and they do things post-mortem. It's done. It's over. It's over. Okay. No Baruch, no Wisdom of Solomon, no Maccabees, nothing reconciles this. Okay. There is no purgatory. There is no intercession of the saints. None of that exists. When we get down to the brass tacks and we start looking at the facts, number one, the nature of the beating like a drum that's being talked about in Hebrews 11 has nothing to do with the death of Eleazar or the women and her 7 children in 2 Maccabees. 2, 2 Maccabees is wrong about the death of Antiochus Epiphanes. Number 1, it puts the timeline 3 years before he died. And number 2, it puts him dying in the region of Judea when that just did not happen. History affirms it did not happen. You can't just say, well, history is wrong, and you can't use the about that time of the first verse of chapter 9 as a try to telescope shit 3 years. Okay, so that's all I've got for today. I want William Albrecht to not be doing the mute you when you make a point I don't like type thing. I don't want to hear 5 people coming at me at once. I want to have a one-on-one conversation with this gentleman because his Deuterocanon has no intact copies for the Septuagint until about late 400 AD. Now, I agree that 1st and 2nd Maccabees was written about 150 BC. I don't deny that. I think that they are Hasmonean propaganda pieces. And you cannot find any proof or evidence that Maccabees is ever being quoted in the New Testament. If you could find me where Jesus is saying, oh, just like this happened in Maccabees, or he explicitly pulls from verses out of Maccabees, you've got nothing. Okay. That's just how it is. To say that one word in the entirety of the New Testament is a similar derivative of a one word used in Second Maccabees is ludicrous, and it is the worst apologetics I've ever heard. So let's all get together as Christians. Let's attack this doctrine at its heels, okay? Because if one part of their Bible, of their canon, is not correct, all of it needs to be brought into purview. And most importantly, that means that purgatory, it's not there. Intercession of the saints, it's not there. We haven't even gotten to Mariology or transubstantiation, but just those two sacraments are proven wrong by the Bible itself. The dead do not know anything. That's it. Okay, shut and closed case. Now the entirety of their sacraments and their entire theology and everything about that religion, which is a cult, needs to be brought into purview and questioned and dissected. So that's all I've got for this time, ladies and gentlemen. And hopefully this helps us build up the apologetics, right? Hopefully we can start getting a little bit sharper, sharpen the sword, and don't try to get caught up in whatever the Catholics will try and say about, well, this word in Hebrews 11, it's used, and then you see it's only ever used in the old. It doesn't matter. Okay. It literally has nothing to do with what Paul is trying to convey in Hebrews 11, which is that some of these prophets, some of these people in the Old Testament were beaten like drums. And I mean, we could go into more of how the purgatory flies in the face of what the nature of the resurrection is. But I think that's all we need to do. We went over the appropriate verses that absolutely do not show anything about post-mortem sanctification or, anything of that nature. So, yeah, hopefully this has been edifying, guys. And until next time, take it easy.